Now, I've heard a lot of talks currently and in the past about how Generation X is not the generation to be blamed for the plight of your everyday African American. And I do agree with what I've heard, but I don't think it's the 100% truth. First of all, people have to understand the difference between racism and prejudice. Alright? Racism is when you deny somebody resources based off of their gender, their race, or their religious beliefs. Meaning you have power. Meaning if I'm a store owner, I'm providing a service. And I'm racist if I deny somebody my services because of their race, gender, or religion, or whatever you can, classify someone as. That's racism. You have to have some sort of power to be racist. And the difference, and the other is prejudice. Now, most people who call themselves racist or who claim other people are racist are not, they're more prejudiced. Being prejudiced is when you have negative thoughts and feelings towards people of a different race, gender, or religion, or whatever. But you don't really have power. So if I say I hate people from Turkey, I'm not racist because I don't have any power over people from Turkey. I just don't like them. So that makes me prejudiced against people from Turkey. Now, if a Turkish person applied for a job for a company that I own and I deny them based on that fact that they're Turkish, that makes me a racist. I just have to get that out the way. So back to what we were saying before. After, the 60s, the 70s was the generation that we need to focus on. Or the era, the decade. The whole afros and bell bottoms. Because it was almost like a celebration for black people as far as what the media puts out there. We're segregation is over, so now you have mixing. You look at these discos and you got white people doing the butt with black people, and everybody's dancing. It seems like everybody's having a good time. So a lot of people think because of this, people feel like this is where we dropped the ball. And the problem with that is stereotypes. There were people in the 70s who were black, who were college educated, and who didn't have afros and bell bottoms, who were trying to find work. Legitly. But they weren't finding this because people were still racist and people were still prejudiced. Now, the civil rights era didn't change how white people felt about black people. That's one thing people don't understand. All it did was take away the right to deny black people access to basic necessities, meaning that if there's a water fountain, black people can drink there. It had nothing to do with changing how white people felt about black people. So black people were still being refused jobs. That's what people don't understand. They were still refused access to the white world because the end of the civil rights era didn't change how white people felt. Yeah, it took away white people's power to be racist, but not completely. So your average day white person was still prejudiced against black people. Think about it. Think about those thoughts and feelings. For a whole race to hate another race. Think about it. If I made a law that you should hate all Mexican people, you don't have to follow it. I can go on TV and mandate that there's a law that, hey, you need to hate Mexicans and you need to refuse Mexican services. Now think about how much hate has to be in your own heart to carry that out. Think about it. If it's a hot day and you're going to deny somebody the right to drink from a drinking fountain, think about how much hate you have. So think about all that hate. That hate didn't go anywhere. So when people say, oh, there's racism still exists, no. What are you guys talking about? There are people from the 60s and the 50s still alive. The grandparents and the great-great-grandparents. Those people are still alive. All that hate didn't go anywhere. So the point I'm trying to make is that People talk about how the generation before Generation X dropped the ball, but in a sense, it's partly true and it's partly not. People swear that just because the civil rights, movement ended and segregation was ended and, integration was, schools were being integrated, that everything was all good. But people were still being denied access to certain places. If you have any relative or uncle or whoever who was college educated, ask them about how the 70s was. I have a couple of uncles who were educated in the 70s, and they'll tell you. I even have a Hispanic friend whose grandpa was a doctor in Mexico, but when he came to the U.S., they denied him the right to practice because they said the level of education that he received over there wasn't equivalent, to the point where they told him he had to start from scratch. And his grandfather was a janitor, and he ended up going to law school, but he was already a doctor in Mexico. This is after the whole civil rights shit ended. So the point I'm trying to make is that the laws and the government and whatever didn't change how people felt about black people. And I think a lot of people get caught up in the 70s stereotype as if, every black person had an afro and every black person had fish in their, their shoes, and they had bell bottoms and they were just doing the butt all day, just doing the butt. That wasn't the case. There was actually black people trying to make strides, who were actually trying to get ahead and put in that work. But the opportunity wasn't there for them. Think about it. Even thinking about affirmative action. I don't even know how to feel about affirmative action because it's like a blessing and a curse. Because you look at it from the white man's point of view, it was their way of saying, shut the fuck up, black people. Think about it. If I have an organization and affirmative action says I have to hire 4 black people, yet 20 qualified black people apply, does that help or hurt us? Because I hire 4, but that's 16 I didn't hire. And I can't go under or over that quota. I have to meet that quota. So in a sense, it helps, but then it hurts. Because affirmative action, the mistake about affirmative action is the fact that, there's not that many qualified blacks, but there's a lot more than people think. Really, there is. And another problem is that your average white American, especially in the 70s and the 80s, would hide their thoughts and feelings about black people. They would hide it. They wouldn't tell you the truth. So, I think we have to understand that white people, or not all white people, but there's always been a group, and there still is a group of white people who have the power to be racist and who are prejudiced. That's what people don't understand. There was never a golden age for black people where we had this window of opportunity that we didn't capitalize on. Trust me, black people back in the day worked 10 times as hard as we work now. I agree. Some people dropped the ball. You can study, the Black Panther movement and towards the end and how it fell and how it gave rise to the Bloods and the Crips and all that. You can look into it because there's arguments for both sides, but I'm trying to say that it's not just one-sided. And I don't want people to think that just because we had the whole civil rights movement, it cleared the way and made everything okay for black people, and we just didn't hop on the ball. And that's just, a falsity. Really, it is. Not everybody had afros and bell bottoms, but they were still being denied jobs because people were still racist and prejudiced. And all affirmative action did was give us a little piece of the pie. Granted, it was still something. That's why I can't blame it or fault it. But, it's like saying instead of giving black people 0% of the pie, we'll give them 7% of the pie. So even though we wanted more, they weren't giving us more. And that's what people need to understand.